What's going on, good people of the internet? It is time once again for Comics Unmasked, the podcast where a bunch of folks shoot the breeze and talk about comic books and such. We are back for episode 28, and this is one that I even told him this was a bucket list interview. This was something that I have wanted to do for years because I've been doing this for 10 years. I had panel to panel. I took a break and did gaming content, and now I'm back doing comic content. And this interview for me is like 6, 8 years, something like that, in the making, where I have been following and learning and studying from this man for years. Joseph Illidge is one of the original editors of Milestone Media. He has gone on to be the first Black editor in the Batman office way back in the day. He was the one that worked alongside Lionforge and created Catalyst Prime, which for all intents and purposes was a redo of Milestone, trying to create diverse narratives for a new age of comic readers. He has worked in publishing inside and outside of comic books. He has worked in all types of media. He even does consulting for people. He genuinely is one of the greatest creative minds of our age. I was so thankful to sit down with him and talk about his history, talk about the comic book industry, talk about the problems with it, and talk about the upcoming release of the new history of the DC Universe, the Dakota Incident. This is DC Comics trying to bring back the Milestone characters and reinsert them into the DC continuity with the help of Joseph Illidge, Nicholas Draper, Ivy, Stephanie Williams, and Morgan Hampton, penning one of the greatest stories that we could possibly hope for. And while Final Order Cutoff has passed, I encourage you to reach out to your comic book store and see if you can secure a copy on February 25th. So I really hope that you folks enjoy this episode because it meant the world to me. Take a look. So the thing that I always start with is the origin. What is obviously we know you got your your start at the big house, but what was the first book that you remember picking up, the first comic? Because much like myself, you do feel that comics are the best medium ever created. So what was the first comic that made you feel like that?
So, my mother, God bless her soul, she was very supportive of me buying comics because comics were part of my reading. And so every Friday, after work, she would take me to the newsstand and she would buy herself soap opera magazines and she would buy me comics. So she was right there as long as I maintained the social contract of getting the good grades, doing my homework, staying in school. It was like, okay, yeah, every Friday I'm going to buy you comics. So, I really grew up as a DC kid from, I would say, the first grade to the third grade. I was very much into Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes.
Okay.
All-Star Comics, the Justice Society of America,
Very nice.
the Brave and the Bold, Amazing Spider-Man, Captain America, things like that. And then it was when I was in the fourth grade, and I have family in the Bahamas.
Okay.
And so I would go there every summer for 2 weeks as a kid. And my aunt, one day she comes home and she brings 6 comics.
Oh.
And yeah, and usually my mom gets me a maximum of 3 every Friday. So 6 is like, hey, wow. And one of them was an issue of the Uncanny X-Men. It was Uncanny X-Men 112. It had a George Perez cover. It had Magneto, and he was pushing back Storm, Colossus, and I think Wolverine. Well, he was getting Wolverine to almost gouge his eyes out. And at the bottom of the cover in big red letters, Magneto triumphant. Okay. And as a Black kid in Flatbush, Brooklyn at the 70s, you read the X-Men and it changes you.
Most definitely, yeah.
Right? Like I had been reading a diet of mostly DC comics, and you read the X-Men and here are these people with powers that are hated and feared and hunted by the world. Right? And then things start clicking in a way. I mean, yes, I had been well aware that I was Black, of course, and I had been subjected to what I'll call minor racism, but X-Men and what it represented for the other, and the other is a vast community and growing community, as we know. That was it. Then I became a Marvel head because Marvel had a real world perspective that
That's
the
fair.
DC comics of those days didn't have. And to keep it real, in those days, so we're talking like the late 70s, right? Because I was born in 1969. So we're talking now like, mid to late 70s.
Okay.
What the kids would say is that DC stands for dumb comics. So like if you read comics, you had to be reading Marvel comics. If you were reading DC, you were reading dumb comics, right? So I switched over to Marvel, and I would remain mostly a Marvel guy until Crisis on Infinite Earths,
That's a
which
fair
came out
jumping back point.
while I was in high school, right? And you had Marvel Superhero Secret Wars on one end, and you had Crisis on Infinite Earths at the other end.
Right.
And Crisis was it. DC relaunched their universe. You had John Byrne on Superman. You had Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli on Wonder Woman. I'm sorry, on Batman. You had George Perez on Wonder Woman. Like, DC went for it. This doesn't
Most
even
definitely,
count Watchmen. This doesn't count Ronin, Frank Miller's Ronin, which came out a few, years before. This doesn't count Camelot 3000. Like, DC just went for it, and suddenly they became the company, right? And so I would go back and forth, but I feel like it was that moment in the fourth grade when I read my first X-Men comic. That was the first time that I would say I started to feel seen by the comics.
That's honestly like really great for me, like similar to what happened with me, because I remember reading one of the most traumatic comic books in the history of comics, Batman the Cult. And my
oh yes,
because my mom just saw
Burley
Batman.
Wrightson, man. Yeah,
my mom just saw Batman, thought it was cool for kids, and then my dad wanted me to make sure I had black superheroes to look up to, so he got me Christopher Priest's Captain America and Falcon, and Jenny Isabella's Black Lightning, because I was born the year Jenny brought it back. So that was very much a big moment for me, was knowing that Brick City Blues and having Priest run back to back. So I definitely identify with that, the idea of being seen from the jump in that era. Because especially because like, and with people will always joke like, oh, are you a Marvel person or a DC person? I always say like, I love both my children equally, but I always want to strangle both of them equally at the same time, is what I tell people.
That's very interesting. And it's interesting that you mentioned Priest, Captain America and the Falcon, because I believe the very first storyline, and thus the only collected edition, was called Two Americas.
Yes.
And as we know about Priest, and Priest is a friend and a mentor in a number of ways, he's one of the most prescient writers that comic books in the North American space has had in the last 50 years. He's one of the most prescient writers. He's one of the industry's most important intellects. Let's make no mistake. Christopher Priest is an intellectual. Yes. And so his Captain America and Falcon, you can read it today and it tracks. And that's unfortunate, but it does.
Yeah. It's insane because like it very much hit me because I didn't fully understand the cult when I first read it, but that the Two America story I understood very early on because it was very identifiable seeing, because like growing up in a white household but seeing a black household on weekends, it definitely was understanding that dichotomy as you read it. Most definitely. I again, similar to yourself, he is on like my like high level Mount Rushmore have to talk to one day, because both of you are so great at what you do. And like so
well,
like,
I mean, listen, I was forged in the fires of Milestone. I was forged in the fires of Dwayne McDuffie, Dennis Cowan, Derek T. Dingle, Michael Davis, and Christopher Priest.
Most definitely. That was the next stopping point right there for me, where it's like, you have an interesting way how you ended up there. You almost didn't. So like, for obviously I've done my research, but for like the people, like this is meant to like sort of give casual like fans a look behind the curtain. But how did you almost miss Milestone but still end up at the door?
I almost missed Milestone because, in 1992, a good friend of mine named Jason Scott Jones, who would go on to become the color editor of Milestone, he would go on to color the infamous Liquid Swords cover that Dennis Cowan illustrated. And now he's a producer in television. He told me about Milestone in 1992. He was interning there. It was this black-owned comic book company, and it was great. He was like, hey man, you should try to get in. And I was like, that's cool, but I'm not going to work for free, because in 1992 the internships weren't paying, right? So how am I going to tell my mom I'm going to work for free? Because I'm a guy, like, my mom's from Jamaica. Ever since I was 13 years old, I've been contributing to rent.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So there's no way I'm going to tell my mom, like, in the early 90s, I'm going to go work someplace for free. So I was like, nah, that's okay. I was working at this art supply store. And in the month of December, I think it was December 20th, actually, a customer called me a black bastard.
Oh.
And 2 days later, I was let go from my job. So 3 days before Christmas, I became unemployed. And so I was collecting unemployment from December of 1992 and, going to May of 1993. And I mean, you know how it is, you're in your early 20s, you're black, you're in Brooklyn. I'm like, when you don't have no income, you can't even look a girl in the eye on the street. Like, if you see someone attractive, you got to keep your head down, because you don't have any money for, like, you can't even start talking to that person. You have no income. Right. So I kind of was like keeping to myself, trying to find a job. It was unsuccessful. And so I walked to this newsstand. And for those listeners who have been raised or know Brooklyn like I do, because I'm born here, there's a newsstand. It's not there anymore, but it was on the corner of Utica Avenue and Church Avenue. And I go in there, and they've got the spinner rack. It's all the regular comics: Avengers, Captain America, Justice League, Superman, whatever. And then I see the cover of Icon #2. And you've got this black man wearing the colors of the flag, right? Red, green, and gold. And you've got this young black girl. She's in the primary colors, and they're back to back, and they're surrounded by riot cops. I never saw a comic book cover speak to me like that. I had a moment, and I knew it in my bones. I said, the people that are making Icon are going to change the world. I want to change the world with them. I don't want to be here looking at that in a newsstand. I want to be in the trenches with them. I want to make a better world.
There you go.
And I'm a comic book geek, so that's the way I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do it in politics. I'm not going to do it in medicine. Maybe I can do it here, right? And then maybe this geekdom that I had that made me an outcast in high school, maybe there's a purpose for it, right?
Most definitely.
And, so then I'm like, oh, crap. I've got to go apply for the internship, which means I got to tell my mom I'm going to apply for an internship. And she supported me, and I went in there and I was interviewed by Matt Wayne, who is an editor there, and Dwayne McDuffie. And Dwayne is sitting in the corner of his office, like the statue Rodin. Dwayne was a massive human being, in addition to being a massive intellect. And he just mostly looked at me. I don't think Dwayne even said 15 words to me. I was mostly talking to Matt. And so I walked out of there thinking, oh, I got this locked. I got the internship. This is the thing that I was born to do. Turned out, nope. I blew the interview to absolute Hades, rolling up in there, chips on both my shoulders. And they had said to Jason, like, I don't know if this guy is the right guy. And he stuck up for me. He was like, no, give him a shot, because, even though we had our ups and downs, he was like, for me to be here and for Joe to not be here, there's something fundamentally wrong with that. And I will not stand in the way of that. Right. That's a true friend. Right. So he's a ride or die friend of mine. And so they gave me a shot. Right. So I was an intern for 3 months. I did things that were fun. I did things that were boring and mundane.
Of course.
And, and I was losing money because at the time I lived in a 2-fare zone and the transit didn't allow for free transfer. So every day I was interning at Milestone, I was losing money. But the education was unlike anything. And so
it was so valuable you made that sacrifice.
You had to. I mean, there was nothing like it. You know, it was this comic book publisher founded by four black men who were the owners. Derek T. Dingle wearing a suit and tie every day, this totally diverse staff building this multicultural, you know, omnisexual, truly diverse superhero universe from the ground up. It was like, there was nothing like this. So I was there for 3 months. And then one day I go into Derek Dingle's office and, you know, I express my appreciation for all the opportunity and the knowledge. I said, but I gotta hit the pavement and get a paying job. Right. And I went to lunch and I came back and he called me in his office and he said, the other founders and I have spoken and we'd like to offer you a part-time job in the business section. And
That's amazing.
And that was it, man. That was the beginning of the never-ending journey for me. Right. And so I started in business and I learned about the infrastructure of the company. And then, you know, I would see Dwayne now and again, of course, he's always in the office and the founders always left their doors open. And one day, you know, Dwayne would like to gather people together sometimes and, you know, just talk about story and stuff. So he gathers a bunch of us interns, whatever, together. And he says, okay, you got a situation, right? He's like, there's a hostage situation. There's a gunman on the roof. He's got this hostage and there's 3 different scenarios. And in one scenario, he's confronted by Daredevil. In another scenario, he's confronted by the Punisher. And another one, he's confronted by Captain America. And he says, if you have any 2 of those characters solve the problem the same way, you're not writing character, you're writing plot. Because those are 3 fundamentally different human beings.
Yes.
So he says that, and then he goes back in his office. And everyone else goes back to what they're doing. And I just stand there, transfixed. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I was like, I want to understand story like that. I want to help provide and shape story like that. You know. And so I moved over, I transitioned from business to editorial, and then that was the first editorial mentorship and story mentorship under Dwayne McDuffie, who is truly one of the best editors North American comics ever had and ever will have, and very much like Christopher Priest, you know, an intellectual. Like he's a genius. Like the man knew quantum physics, the man knew philosophy. He went to the Wharton School of Business, knew his music like anyone else, Parliament, Bootsy Collins, the whole thing. But Dwayne was a genius, God rest his soul, and he was the person that showed me that story is meant to unite humanity. That's what story's for, right? And humanity is going to fight us every step of the way, but we're still going to try.
Most definitely.
Right? So that's where it began for me.
Most definitely. I'm over here like just transfixed just listening to that, because like to be in his space had to just be otherworldly.
Yeah, and I'm an only child, so basically Dwayne became like the older, bigger brother I never had. The older, bigger, freaking super genius brother that I never had. Up until that moment, I had never met someone with the IQ of him. You know?
Most definitely. And if I recall correctly, you were there all the way until the end of Milestone. Is that correct?
Practically until the end of the first iteration of Milestone, which ended in 1997. So I believe I was there until March of 1997. I made sure to put Hardware 50 to bed because I was the editor of Hardware. And then I left. And I feel like the offices may have closed their doors in April or May of that year. So I was there almost to the very end. Yes.
And like there's that story people tell that like y'all were just doing it for the love at the end of it. Like y'all weren't even getting paid from what people had said.
What happened was, you know, the relationship between DC and Milestone had eroded. It was subjected to systematic dismemberment, right? And so because of that, the finances changed.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, Milestone could no longer afford to pay me, right? And I still had to put Hardware 50 to bed, right? And in my mind, I'm like, well, you don't leave, you don't walk out with a job halfway done. Like, that's not being an adult, that's not being a man, and that's not me giving back to the people who gave me purpose. And so for the last 2 weeks, I was like, doesn't matter. And I
Beautiful.
went in there 5 days a week and I worked and I finished that comic and then I left. But, that's the way you do it. And something that I don't think I've ever said publicly, but I'll say to you is a few months later, while I was getting unemployment, I get an envelope and the envelope has a check in it. And Derek T. Dingle, from his own personal account, paid me for the 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I saw him
Yeah.
in Robert Kirkman's documentary episode, and like his energy is so kind, and I would love to talk to him one day.
Wise human being who has done more for Black people in business than most people will ever know. Yeah.
Just phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like it's wild because like it feels as if moments like that kept you coming back to this industry, because like you dipped out for a little bit and then you had an opportunity to come back and work. Like you kind of jumped over the erosion into the bigger house. How did that happen? How did you end up being at DC's door?
Yeah. So DC, what happened was, you know, Milestone ended. I was doing some freelance writing of things that never got published. Then I did some freelance editing for this client. And then what happened was I temped at DC. DC needed a temp. They would hire temps through temp agencies.
Right.
And so I temped for a few months and I was a temp assistant editor on books like Chase and the second volume of Tangent, the early Kyle Rayner Green Lantern, things like that. And so I temped for a few months and then, the temp session ended. I left. I went to work at Simon and Schuster in the Star Trek division where they did the novels and the coffee table books. And so I was there for 7 months and learning about the Star Trek franchise from a business perspective. And then what happened was one Friday, I go and visit, the old buds at DC Comics just to see what's up. And I went to visit Jordan Gorfinkel, who was like the number 3 Batman editor, because I had this story idea for Oracle for an issue of Batman Chronicles, because I'm a big fan of Oracle. I was so happy that I got to be an editor of Birds of Prey. So I told Gorf this. Everyone called him Gorf. And he said, oh, okay, that's cool, but I want to talk to you about something. He said, so one of our guys is leaving and we need an associate editor for the Batman department. Wow. You want the job?
And that's how you became the first Black editor in the Batman office.
The first Black editor and the first editor of color, period.
Whoa.
In Batman, yes. That was in 1998. That was 59 years after Batman's debut in Detective Comics 27, yes.
Wow. And you didn't mess around either. From what I've heard, like you made sure that Gotham had a little more Black in it after that. You made sure of that.
Well, listen, let me be, perfectly candid with you. I felt some guilt working at DC because of the erosion of the relationship between DC and Milestone and DC's, as I said, systematic dismemberment of Milestone. But I felt like I could live with this. I could atone for this if I can continue the mission of Milestone in Gotham City. If I can be the Sojourner Truth of the Batman editorial department. If I can do that, then I'm doing good here. Right? And so that was what I did. I said, okay, I got taught by one of the best editors in comics. I'm going to bring an editorial standard here. And as a caretaker of Batman, a character that I had been reading since the first grade, and I read influential stories that divined Batman's character very clearly, I felt I could be a proper caretaker of the intellectual property that was Batman and Gotham City and his supporting characters and continue the mission of Milestone, which was to give opportunities to people from different walks of life. And I did that. And when I did that, I made sure I only brought in the best.
Most definitely.
That was it. You only bring in the best, because if you bring in the best people and the best people get rejected, they're not getting rejected because of their talent.
Exactly.
Right? So I always made sure to bring people that had the skills. You know, and that's what I did for a few years. And that was my contribution. And during that time, we did No Man's Land. We did the year 2000 relaunch with Greg Rucka and Sean Martin Bros. Detective Comics, which spun out of, you know, in, at least aesthetically, the one-shot Batman The Hill, which was written by Christopher Priest and illustrated by Sean Martin Bro, which is a book that I made a mission to make sure that it would see publication, and it did.
I remember finding that at the library one time and loved it.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like, you read that, you can't see Batman the same way again after you read The Hill, right? And so bringing in people like Eric Battle and novelist Stephen Barnes, you know, it was just like, listen, let's bring the best people, but the best people from, you know, a variety of ethnicities and complexions and walks of life. Everyone gets a shot at Gotham.
I love that. Beautiful. What ended that era? Like what was the turning point that said your time at DC had come to an end for now, and then made you go elsewhere?
For me, it was, you know, I was 30 years old, and there were clashes with the corporate structure, right? It was the biggest corporate structure I had ever worked in. Corporate structure means corporate politics. It means negotiating through a floor of landmines. I did not have the business acumen to negotiate the landmine that was DC
That's fair.
Comics and to reconcile it with myself. You know, I'm a person that, again, I was forged from Milestone. And one of the core things I learned there is that you have to fight for what you believe in. And so sometimes I engaged battles that more cautious people would have not.
That's fair.
Right? But those are the moments that change things, right? Like, maybe I took a bullet then, but it yielded larger benefits later. Or maybe I dodged a bullet and didn't know it until 20 years later. That's like, oh, you know. So I think one thing that I've just learned is that, and it's funny because this is very much for the Star Trek Next Generation geeks. It's the, like myself, it's the episode where Q sends Picard back into the past so he doesn't get into that bar fight with that alien who stabs him through the heart, and he ends up living through it, but he ends up living this boring life because he never took a risk. Right? And I just learned that you're not living if you play it safe.
Most definitely.
You're not living if you don't take scrapes and stumble and hits, and if you don't get knocked on your ass sometimes and discover whether you have it in you to get back up and fight tomorrow. And so that was it. You know, that's who I have been for some time, and that's who I continue to be.
Most definitely. And like, you definitely carried on this mission. You like that I think like that's like the title of the episode is just straight up the mission, because you kept that going elsewhere, and it ended up even like becoming a whole column like when it came to your like talk about that, because genuinely, what were the topics that you would write about when it came to this, and how did that opportunity come about?
So what happened is, you know, I have been in publishing since, you know, 1993, starting at Milestone, interweaving in and out of comics publishing sometimes, but always in publishing. And wherever I went, I always tried to do something involved with comics. And what happened was Dwayne McDuffie died. And it broke me, man. I was done. I was shattered. Couldn't handle it. And, with the help of the woman who I would end up marrying and the Milestone family, the shards came back together and I reintegrated. And when that happened, I was looking at comics. And with the disappearance of Milestone, I was seeing the presence of us disappearing into the ether. And I saw people using Dwayne McDuffie as the excuse. Like, well, there's no more Milestone. So do we really have to do this anymore? We can just go back, right? Because there's no presence advocating for this. So we don't have to advocate for it either. So we don't have to make any extra effort anymore. Right. And I saw things going like this in real time. And so I said, I'm going to go full in now, and I'm going to continue the mission. Right. But I said, but I knew, when you had your last neck deep involvement in the industry, you left as an angry black man. I was like, the industry will not welcome back an angry black man. So what you have to do is you have to be a diplomat. You have to become the scalpel now. You can't be the hammer anymore. And so when I came back, I started doing, like an interview here. Brandon Thomas and Brandon Easton had this podcast called The Two Brandons. And I think that was the first podcast in which I did an interview. And so, I would do these interviews and I would talk about the confluence of business and the fiction, because everyone was talking about the fiction, but no one was really talking about what's happening behind the scenes.
Exactly.
With the executives, with the creators. So, I'm a Libra Scorpio. So I have this passionate side and I have this analytical side. And I learned to make them work together so that I could be a creative scalpel. And what happened was people started taking notice. And so at the time, CBR was owned by a guy named Jonah Weiland. He reached out to me and he said, hey, would you like to write a Black History Month column? So one column every week for Black History Month. And I was like, yeah, cool. Like, I know CBR. You guys have a good rep. I'll do that. And so I did that. And then he said, why don't you write a few more? And then I did that. And then he said, I think we got something here. I'd like to make it permanent. And I said, okay, if it's permanent, then I'm really going to go in now. And so I started off doing interviews with people like Jamie Brudnax of Black Girl Nerds, Afua Richardson, who's a goddess for us all, LaShawn Thomas, big guy in animation, I think Jeffrey Thorne. But when the weekly column started, I said, okay, I'm going all in now. And I really talked about the politics of all of this, right? The politics of this and of the money and of the decisions and how it created Rolodexes that were mostly monolithic in its complexion of participants and how you had a Marvel Cinematic Universe that was developing, but not a lot of people, if anybody, that looked like me were getting break-off checks because they weren't allowed to write the fiction in the period of time that the Marvel Cinematic Universe was drawing from. So it was another way in which we were denied opportunities to generational wealth. So I was having these conversations straight and plain. And sometimes I would piss off executives at the big two. And sometimes I figured out how to negotiate that. But that was what led to the column. And the column ended up being prescient. And I remember one time I got a call from somebody and they said, you're making a difference. He said, I just had a conversation at Marvel Comics that I couldn't have had 1 year ago.
Wow.
And they were like, keep going. All right. So that's how that came about.
Wow. Like I've read some of your work, and it definitely shows that, like, you and I definitely identify, like, very similarly, because it's like you don't want to upset too much, but then you get pushed to that point that you have to be surgical on how you approach things and not just be. That's kind of why I left the comic book space a number of years ago, right when my mom passed away. I was like, you know what, I'm tired of being the angry black man. I'm tired of just yelling on the mic and not getting anywhere. So it definitely feels very like kindred there, where it's like you have to find a new way to do things.
Yes.
Very
It
much.
was continuing the Milestone mission
Mm,
in a different way, right?
mm.
It was
Most
putting
definitely.
the system to task and saying, I'm not going to let you forget.
Mm,
I'm not going to let you put us under the rug.
mm,
I'm going to put you on task every Monday at 6 o'clock and get paid for it.
mm. I like where this is going. This is going to be fun. So the other thing that I wanted to touch on was Lion Forge, because Lion Forge
Yes.
feels like the next step of the mission. Catalyst Prime feels like
Yes.
the next step of the mission in a big way. Like, I remember reading Noble for the first time because my sister Mary handed it to me and was like, this feels like this was meant for you. And I remember reading Noble and just felt like it was everything to me. What
Yes.
for those who didn't see Catalyst Prime be birthed and then fall, how, like, what was it, or like what was it for you, and what is it that it should be remembered by?
So, Catalyst Prime is definitely a highlight of my career in comics. And what happened was the owners of Lion Forge, and one of them in particular, David Stewart II, was aware of me because I had met Lion Forge at some conventions.
Mm-hmm.
And, he basically said, I want my own Milestone. I want my own Static. Can you help me make it? And I said, you want to go up against DC and Marvel? And he said, yeah. I said, okay, let's do it. That's a crazy goal,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if you're going to engage a crazy goal, then yeah, I don't want to play it safe,
Most
right?
definitely.
So then what happened was, well, how do you build a universe from the ground up, right? So when I started working at Milestone had the Milestone Bible, which is like over, I think, 150 pages. It's made up of the micro Bible, Static, Hardware, Icon, Blood Syndicate. And so I was used to Bibles because the Batman department had a Bible. I think it was like 75 pages. So when I went to
Only
Lion Forge,
75.
well, listen, 75 of the dopest pages you've ever seen. Like, there's Brian Stelfree's Nightwing turnarounds in there. You're like, golden.
He's one of my
man.
favorite artists. Like,
I mean, well, Brian Stelfreeze is one of the best artists in comics.
most definitely.
This is beyond debate. That's a fact, right?
For sure.
And so I said, hey, so where's your Bible? And they gave me a 4-page document. And I was like, oh. I was like, okay. I said, look, the first thing we need is a Bible. The way we create a Bible is we need a writer's room, which is something that I took from television, right? Television shows have writer's rooms. I said, we need a Catalyst Prime writer's room. And so I put that together, right? And the final linchpin was Christopher Priest, but the Catalyst Prime writer's room was Brandon Thomas, Amy Chu, Alex DeCampi, David F. Walker, Dr. Sina She Howard, Joe Casey, Ramon Govea, who was a co-creator of one of the title's incidentals, and Christopher Priest was the final one. I saw him. He was talking about Deathstroke on a panel at San Diego Comic-Con in 2016. Now, at this point, Priest and I were not yet friends. And so after the panel, I went up to him. I said, hey, can I take you out to lunch? I'm doing something, and I think it would be great if you would be involved. And he said yes. He said, can we do stuff with real world dynamics and challenge people? I said yes. He said, okay, right? And so it was just perfect because he was one of the architects of Milestone. So to be one of the architects of the 21st century Milestone, that was just a universe.
Mm-hmm.
There was just a universe working in the favor of it, right? And so we put together the writer's room, and I think we had a conference for like 3 days. And out of that, we and my assistant editor, Desiree Rodriguez, came up with like a 75-page Catalyst Prime Bible. And then we started making the books. And we knew how they all interconnected. And it was like, okay, first you get the scripts done, then you bring in the pencilers, the inkers, the colorists, the letterers. Like you build every book like its own project. No two books feel the same, but this is all one integrated ecosystem. And when we announced it at New York Comic Con, because Lion Forge had gone through a massive transformation, it was one of the talks of New York Comic Con that year. It was New York Comic Con 2016, like Lion Forge and the new divisions, including Catalyst Prime, but dominated New York Comic Con. And we launched in 2017, and that was it. And we launched amazing comics, an amazing line. We lived up to the promise of what Milestone was in the 20th century. And, you know, Lion Forge got their superhero universe. They got their static. They got their models. And I believe the line would end up getting published for 3 years and then stop, except for one title called Quincredible.
Yes, I just made a video about that.
Yeah. So, but, you know, the team of people that made these books, it was really special. It was a great time. And like every great time, it has its ups and downs. But at the end of the day, we all had the same mission, which was to tell the best stories. And I think we all understood that stories have profound importance. These things that we're making, they affect people profoundly.
Most definitely.
Okay. And so it's a noble purpose. And so people still talk about these books to me today. You mentioned Noble. Noble was on a whole other level. There's things that Brandon was saying through Noble. We could have those conversations right now.
Yes.
I mean, Noble was very layered, superb. All the books, Summit, all the books. So, you know, that was that time. And, you know, for me, like, you can't see it in the camera, but so, oh no, actually this shelf.
The whole shelf?
These are like all the trades, all the issues that I edited, right, are there. But yeah, those are like the trades from the ones I edited. So it's wild. Yeah.
I love that universe. I remember like y'all were getting hyped up for an event and like Gail Simone was going to be a part of it, and then just silence. And I was just so heartbroken.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it's tough, right? It's tough when you put, I mean, Catalyst Prime demanded things out of me that I didn't know I had, right? Because when it was originally being developed, I did not anticipate being the voice of the line. But no one else in the company wanted to be in the voice of the line. And one of the things I knew, and I still believe to this day, is that part of the reason Marvel is the brand that it is because Stan Lee gave Marvel a voice. He spoke to the people and they felt seen. They were like, it's Uncle Stan. It was like, yeah, Marvel is cool. Marvel is talking to me. And so I'm like, we're going to make this line of superheroes. We're going to go up against the two titans of superheroes. This line needs a voice. And if no one else is going to be the voice, I guess it's going to have to be me. And so I made the decision. I was like, okay, it's Catalyst Prime all the time. This is the continuation of the mission. Right?
Most definitely.
And so to your point about when things change and it just disappeared, well, one of the things that you learn in life is that it takes more than skill. There is this elusive quality of the spirit. And my DNA and my spirit and my faith and my hopes and my belief in everyone that came along for the ride. And people came along from the ride from all walks of life. It wasn't just black. It was across the spectrum. I mean, John Cassaday, God rest his soul, who did 7 amazing covers for us. John Cassaday was white, right? So it was like everyone came together for this. My soul is in Catalyst Prime. And the removal of my soul means that something's missing. And I'm sorry, you just can't replace that. And that's not me being arrogant. That's me talking to you about an existential reality about when we make things, when we surrender ourselves to the making of things. Right?
Most definitely.
So
Most
that's
definitely.
it.
I definitely understand that. Like, yeah. I want to shift because this is where we're gonna put a little bit of feet to the fire on this portion here. Milestone returns.
Yes.
Obviously, you ended up back in the DC house at some point because this exists.
Yes.
What were the initial talks that got you involved with Milestone Returns? Because obviously there was the big DC fandom, we're back, we're cooking, give us time. But then there was silence for almost 2 years. And it was what's going on? And then finally the book started to come out, but it was season 1, silence. Then new books. But it wasn't even they were seasons. It was a book here and a book here, then nothing else. What, and then your book came out with Shadow Cabinet. What were the talks? How did this occur like this? Because the word that I used with what Morgan Hampton, the word that Morgan Hampton used that they'll hear next week is momentum was lost. So why did it take so long for Milestone Returns to come about, and what happened in the interim with that?
Those are excellent questions. So I will tell you as much as I can tell you legally and to the extent of my knowledge. Static. Static is the linchpin of everything.
Of course.
Static is the code that DC could not crack. And they tried.
Yeah.
They tried with Johnny Thunder and they failed. They tried with Duke Thomas and they failed. Static was the code they couldn't crack.
They even tried to give him his own book in New 52 when they couldn't crack it.
Well, listen. Let me be kind. All mythologies are adaptable. They can be reinterpreted. We can examine things. But I think it would be fair to say that one was the furthest away.
Yeah.
From the spirit. With the best intentions, but it was the furthest away.
Most definitely.
So, and that might have been subject to the fact that the New 52 had a set of rules. It was the brainchild of someone, and they were rethinking things. So I think part of it was the New 52 ecosystem, and part of it was just again, static is elusive, right?
Most definitely.
So static is the prize gem, right? From a corporate context, very much so. Right. And so there are always negotiations. These negotiations take time. And, the Milestone people and the DC people had been negotiating for some time. And you got to remember, Milestone went through a change. There was a new Milestone, which was the one that we have now that, owned by Reginald Hudlin, Dennis Cowan, Derek T. Dingle. Which is not the same in a legal corporate context as the first Milestone, which was Milestone Media LLC, right?
Interesting.
It was one
a lot of people don't know that.
Is one company that led to another company, right? Which then, of course, changes the fabric of the negotiations, right? But, Reginald Hudlin coming in, using Morgan's chosen word of momentum, gave the return a momentum, right? And if you know anything about Reginald Hudlin as a person in entertainment, the word no is not a part of his vocabulary.
Yeah.
So if he decides something will be, it will be. How long it will take to be is to be determined, but it will come to manifestation. And so
most definitely.
that is, why it ultimately took so long. It's the negotiation between two companies and one company going through a recalibration into another company, right? But then we get to the relaunch, right? And now at that point, I'm not involved in Milestone. I, of course, am friends with Reginald Hudlin and Dennis Cowan. Both of them are mentors of mine, have been good to me and my family. But I'm not in Milestone proper. So I'm actually on the outside looking at this, right? And I'm like, okay, it started off with a bang, like hard, man. And then, like you said, the up, the down, the up, the down. And, one of the things about us as a community is we have a lot of faith to offer, but our faith is not infinite.
Ooh.
Our faith is quite finite. And when you reach the end of that faith, it's not pleasant for your bottom line.
Yeah.
Okay? And so, fortuitously, I had started conversations with Reggie and Dennis about, Shadow Cabinet. And I was like, hey, I'd like to take a whack at that. That was my favorite title from back in it, because I'm a spy junkie, man. And so the original Shadow Cabinet was all, like Justice League meets Mission Impossible. I loved it. I wrote an issue, as you know.
Yes.
And so we talked, and then they brought me in contact with Marquise Draper, who was the editor at that time. And at the time, Chris Conroy was overseeing Milestone.
Right.
And so then I ended up having a talk with them. And I said, what is this? I said, in your mind, is Shadow Cabinet Mission Impossible, or is it Avengers Endgame? And they said, it's Avengers Endgame. And I said, okay, now I know what the mission is. The mission is I have to write the story that is the culmination of the last 4 years of stories. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And to do that, I said, well, I need to change the world so that I can create a new starting point for new readers, but put the regular readers and the characters through hell. And so I used the Brainiac invasion from Icon versus Hardware to change the world, to then recalibrate the positions of everybody, emotionally affect them, as I did with Virgil, make Rocket's mission more profound and perilous, throw Icon into space. I mixed it all up, right? To then bring it back together, right? So that was how it came to be. And, DC was very cool with it, because we all had this big conference call. And then I went away from that call, and 2 weeks later, I did a 21-page pitch. From the first moment to the last, from meeting Angela Alva to Rocket and Static as the heroes of Dakota. I could see it all from the 10,000-foot view. Now, things change along the way as you're writing.
Of course,
that's just writing. But I needed the 10,000-foot view.
Understandable.
And I got very few red strikes with Mark.
That's good.
So I was like, okay, this is the story we're doing. And then I just went into it, man.
That's beautiful. Like that last page still sticks in my head, where it felt like Rocket finally got her upgrade, where she finally was able to like be on her own. And like, yeah, Icon might come back at some point, but like her and Static were that next generation. It kind of felt similar to the rebirth of Cool, where you brought them back in a major way in that format.
Yes. You better believe that rebirth of the Cool, by Dwayne McDuffie and John Paul Leon, God rest both of their souls, was definitely kind of like a spiritual North Star for me, right? And it's the stories that we want to see. Like, we want to see our heroes put through the ringer, because when they get to the other side, we will believe that when we are put through the ringer, we might make it to the other side. These stories are our messages to ourselves about how are we going to make it in this world. That's what the stories are. They're the codes. Right.
Most definitely.
So that's it. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to hit you with something that there's a quote that I know that both you and I hold very dear.
Yes.
You cannot escape without knowing where all the barriers are.
Yeah. More specifically, escape is impossible until one perceives all of the barriers.
Yes.
That is page 3 of Hardware 1. Hardware number 1 is one of the best number 1 issues of a superhero comic book ever produced in North America.
I remember finding this at the same shop my dad got me those first 2 issues, like when I was in high school, and I've had this ever since. So, like, genuinely, I cherished that quote because it got me out of a rough time then, and it feels like we're in a rough time now. It feels very spiritual to where it is, and I feel like as a community over the past few months, that, like, not just comic talk, but like as I've come in about it, like, because I went and did video game content for a little bit, but I kind of came back in with a sledgehammer and went, y'all are gonna pay attention this time. And I said the reason, because it started with Green Arrow being canceled and everybody being mad at Scott Snyder, where he said the sales are the problem. But what he didn't say was the first barrier. The pre-orders are the problem, because so many individuals don't understand that pre-orders are what control the market. Because, like, Batman's going to sell 50, 60, 70 million copies all day, every day, because there's a incentive covers that they have to hit. Comic shops know at some point someone's going to pick up a back issue of Batman. Versus a perfect example is Mr. Terrific Year 1 last year.
Yes.
No one believed in it. Shops didn't believe in it. My store alone had got 1 for me because I was a subscriber and 1 for the shelf. And that's the argument we hear constantly is, oh, I got 1 for my subscribers and 2 for the shelf or 1 for the shelf. And I want to unpack the first barrier, like, with you, is what is your view on the issue at hand that has sort of awakened in people's minds now that I've come in and rang the bell, which is the pre-orders. What is your view on the pre-order system?
So, to your point, yourself and a number of individuals in the space have really been pushing this gospel. And as you know, I pushed it with every issue of Shadow Cabinet. I believe I pushed it with Black Lightning, Brandon Thomas, and Pico Asio. But I am so thrilled that you and others in your community, the podcasters or on the internet, you're all talking about this in unison. So let's talk about that first barrier. So there's a number of things. Number 1, the pre-order system, the direct market. The direct market is a system that is complicated.
Yes.
We live in an era of Amazon. Amazon makes it easy to get anything. You can order something from the other side of the planet, and Amazon makes it easy. The direct market makes it hard. So number 1, people will have to put in the effort. In a world of Amazon and Netflix where other companies make processes easy, it's an effort to put in an effort.
Yes.
Because everyone else makes it easy, right? But the unfortunate reality is we have to put in the extra effort. And what it means is you call up your retailer or you go to the retailer and you say, hey, I want this. And I'm sorry, just wanting number 1 is not good enough.
Agreed.
Because everyone knows number 1 is going to have the high number and then issue 2 falls off the cliff, right?
Right.
But this is not happening with Absolute Batman. Absolute Batman is a reverse trajectory.
It's a mythical being in its own right,
where the sales keep going up. Part of that is new walk-ins, but part of that is pull-lists.
It's pull-lists, but it's also speculation too.
100%. 100%. So we have to reserve these books in advance, because something you said so eloquently and just straightforward was, when you walk in a shop and buy a comic book, that is not a sale.
Mm-hmm. It's already considered a sale.
It's purchased. It's already
Yes.
purchased. It's there for you. So that's not a sale. The sale is before the retailers place the order, because what you're doing is you're showing demand. Because if you don't show that 20 people at a particular store want Mr. Terrific, they'll just order 2.
Yeah.
But if you show them 20 people want it, they have to order the 20, right? So number one, unfortunately, it is on us consumers to show the demand, but that gives us power.
Yeah.
It gives us power by showing demand, because purchasing power can be given and withdrawn.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely.
Which is a whole other thing, right? Mm-hmm. So the pre-order system is not an easy system, but it is on us to show the retailers what we want. And that is, as you stated, that's the first barrier.
Most definitely. The second barrier that I kind of quantified perfectly, well, I already had it on the list, but then somebody commented on last week's episode of the show and put it perfectly in perspective, because they were referring to the Wonder Man TV show that came out this past few weeks. And they said, I liked the Doorman episode, but I feel like it is a bit geared too much towards a black audience. Right. And that right there is the second barrier that we deal with, is anybody, because of how we've been engineered as a society, can go in, pick up Batman, because Batman is the default. That is a book that everyone can imprint on, because you were told at a young age, imprint on Batman, imprint on Spider-Man, and just accept it, because that's all you're ever going to get. Versus with, say, Static or Mr. Terrific or Black Lightning, specifically those two from last year, they have to actually fight doubly so to get pre-orders, to get people to buy them, because they are living in a reality where their skin tone is front and center, and they're not the default. They're not something that audiences can just go, hey, I am a fan of comic books and good stories, I'm going to go pick that up. It's the fans who don't feel like they can imprint on it because they don't see them, because they're not the default anymore. So that's the issue in its own right, where people will say, oh, a black audience will appreciate this, but not everybody will appreciate this. What is your perspective on that?
All right. I'm glad you asked that question, because this is something that I don't think people talk about enough. So let's talk about it. Corporate society, corporate America in particular. We'll start with corporate America. I'm not going to speak for the corporate UK or the corporate European Union or corporate Africa. Corporate America. One of the pillars of corporate American entertainment is that cultural experience is culturally exclusive. This is a lie.
Yes.
It was proven to be a lie a number of times, but I want to cite one particular time. I want to cite the film Black Panther.
Yes.
Now, let me tell you something about Black Panther. Obviously, we all represented, and obviously, people that didn't have our complexions represented. And we went and saw the movie again and again and again, and so did other people.
Right.
At the time, my wife worked at ABC, which, as you know, is part of the Disney
umbrella, yeah.
And the CEO, Bob Iger, sent an email to everyone under the DC umbrella, overjoyed at the success of Black Panther. Here's the key. He said, we did not realize what we had. We did not know what this was. They thought, Black Panther's going to make $400,000 and then we're done because we made your black hero film. But it made $1 billion.
Yeah.
And corporations can ignore millions with an M, but they cannot ignore billions with a B.
No, they cannot.
And the email that I'm telling you about, he cited in his memoir, Ride of a Lifetime. You can read the memoir of Bob Iger, CEO of Disney. He mentions that email, but I remember my wife telling me about it in real time. Wow. So they did not know. Black Panther exposes the lie that cultural stories are culturally exclusive. So unfortunately, this second barrier is perpetuated by that lie. Mr. Terrific's story is not just a Black story.
Agreed.
It is the story of the human condition, as is Static, as is Black Panther, as is Storm, as is Miss Marvel, as is Katana, as is the X-Men. These are the stories of the human experience. And we all must continue to fight this lie. Because this lie is affecting generational wealth. It's making it harder for people to have opportunities. And if we're going to get down to the get down, there are parties within the system that are not interested in the lie disappearing. They want the lie to be maintained, right? Because any form of wealth, whether it's money, whether it's intellectual property, whether it's real estate property, any form of wealth that people from the community of the other get, there is this core belief that if the other gets power, they will take merciless revenge on those whom have denied them the power for so long. So there are systems in place in every strata of our society to prevent the other from getting power. But I am here to tell you, when we get the power, we're not going to take revenge on you because we don't care about you enough. We are magnanimous. We are going to take the power and we're going to make this a just and better world. Despite what has been done to us. And I'm sorry that you cannot understand the concept of magnanimity. But we are a magnanimous people.
Beautiful.
Okay? So that is the problem. Then it leaks down to comics, right? But I'm telling you, my wife is white. We went and saw Superman, James Gunn's Superman. We come out of that theater. My wife is a tough customer. My wife's favorite character was Mr. Terrific.
Love that.
Now, rightfully so. I would say a film called Superman in which someone's favorite character is Mr. Terrific, there's some discussions to be had, but that's not this podcast.
Of course.
My wife came from theater. She is particularly literate and insightful and intelligent. And her favorite character was Mr. Terrific because Mr. Terrific was the most realized character in that film. Yeah. This is not a debate. That is a fact, okay? And if that's the case, if my white wife, who doesn't read most of this stuff, can walk into a Superman film and dig Mr. Terrific, then cultural identity is not culturally exclusive. Okay? And that's it.
That was beautifully put. From your perspective, does DC understand that the lie exists in the marketplace? Because it feels as if, like, Mr. Terrific, Black Lightning, they're all judged on the same battlefield as Green Arrow, Flash, Aquaman, etc., even though they're fighting a difficult battle. Is there like an understanding from DC that they kind of need to be graded on a curve and they're not being graded on a curve? Because like I remember last year, like you said, like Brandon Thomas was in the trenches telling people about like FOC for Black Lightning and nobody was listening. Back when Milestone Returns was coming out, Vita Ayala and all of y'all were like, "Hey, FOC is coming," but A, people don't understand how about the pre-order system, but B, people don't understand what FOC is. So it's this issue of like the great, like it almost feels like we need to be on a curve tried to like judge the analytics versus our white counterparts.
That's a good point. So what happens is, so comic books, every title, every issue that you buy
Mm-hmm.
is usually governed by a profit and loss statement, right? There's an assessment. That assessment is based off of history, right? So, for example, if Mr. Terrific Year One was not a success, when they make the next Black character comic and they come up with a profit and loss statement that looks at history, well, how did Mr. Terrific perform? Well, then does that in some way define how this will perform? Because retailers do that. I can tell you for a fact. I talk to retailers and they will say, well, I ordered the amount of the new Black character thing that I ordered for Mr. Terrific. Right? So everyone is governed by historical data, but the historical data is affected by the lie and by prejudices and by our collective lack of engagement in the pre-order system. Right? And I'm glad you said final order cutoff, because people hear that, they don't know what the hell that means. Final order cut, what does that mean? That's Greek to me, which means that when we talk about pre-order, we must make it straight and plain as if we're talking to fourth graders. And it's not to insult the people. It's to communicate with clarity and efficiency what this is and what
translate the system, basically.
Bingo. That's what we have to do. So DC Comics is owned by Warner Brothers Discovery. So they're well aware of the kind of history and the decisions that have been made from that history. But, once in a while, you'll get an outlier that will expose the lie. So for Disney, it was Black Panther. And for Warner Brothers Discovery, quite recently, it was Sinners.
Ooh, yeah. And like, I'm glad you brought up Black Panther, because the one that I always point to that like exposes the lie, but also like shows the lie in its truest form, is you saw Amazon constantly sell out of Coates' first volume of Black Panther. And they were like, all right, cool, let's give you 2 more. And then Black Panther and the Crew went from being pitched as an ongoing to being a 6-issue mini after issue 1 had horrible sales. And it was so scary watching that unfold in real time, because I was getting the press releases and it was like, oh my God, you went from saying ongoing to mini within less than 2 weeks.
That's
and
right.
that was when I first woke up to the terror that is the system, because no one really understood even back then that this is a concern, this is a problem, and it became alienating to a certain extent, because it's like when you wake up from the Matrix and you understand it's all crap, and you have to understand that it's a whole different system. Versus now, people are starting to wake up, but it's almost like you're powerless to fix it beyond just pre-order and hope.
Right. Well, the pre-ordering has a lot of power, right? So, I'd like to talk about New History of the DC Universe, the Dakota Incident.
That was my next step, yes.
So, this is a book written by myself, Stephanie Williams, Morgan Hampton, Nicholas Draper Ivy. It has over 22 creators, and this is an important book for the Milestone fans. DC fans will love it. There's some Easter eggs and secrets. Man, when you read this, like, we all put 125% of ourselves
most definitely
into this book. And so part of what also makes this book important was the revelation of the return of Static in DC KO that kids are all fight. Right? Because it's like, okay, wait a minute. Dude's talking about he hasn't put on this costume in a while and he's returning. What does that mean? Well, the Dakota Incident will answer that, right? And so many people got excited, but there are a number of people who doubt that this means anything, because they're looking at the past and they've seen Milestone come and go, and they've seen what they see as DC's limited commitment to Milestone, And so they don't know, right? So
Well, and
there's
I would argue also is that it's not just a limited commitment to Milestone. I would argue it's a limited commitment to Black characters because
mm-hmm.
a perfect example, which I was gonna like, that was like the next stopping point as we lead into the Dakota incident, is the memification of the February exclusive. For the past
Yes.
for the past 3 years, you had DC
Yes.
Power back to back to back, and
Yes.
then nothing was announced for this year beyond Torrin Clark's variant covers, but
Yes.
then the new history of the DC Universe, the Dakota incident was announced, saying, "Hey, this is like it's not a February exclusive, but it is a February exclusive, and
Right.
there might be more later." What does that mean? What does that mean that there might be more later to you, to this team, when it comes to like, if this does well, you might get more later?
Okay. So I'm glad you asked that. I've seen the memes. I understand the position of those memes. I understand the position of the fans who believe in that, in what the memes represent, and quite frankly, the evidence that has been presented to support that. So let's brass tacks it.
Let's do it.
Pre-order. Pre-ordering this book is stage one.
Mm.
And as you saw, myself and the other three writers, we were out there talking the gospel last week up until final order cutoff day on Monday. We called in favors and got people to talk about it. You took time and talked about it. There was a trailer that was made. And let's just be clear about something. DC Comics did not make that trailer. I did.
I'm glad you said that,
I
because that was
made
my
that
I was gonna
trailer.
say that.
And paid rhymes with made. I paid to have that trailer made. I wrote it. I art directed it, right? I co-produced it. Why did I do that? Because we must treat the projects that we work on and believe in the same way that the corporations treat their big characters. The same way DC Studios is going to treat Supergirl and Lobo, the same way Marvel Studios will treat Avengers Doomsday. We have to treat it the same way. So that trailer was made to basically be the climax to the pre-order campaign. But that is just stage one. And a lot of people showed screenshots with evidence that they pre-ordered. They said, I'm pre-ordering all 5 covers. James, Stephanie Williams pre-ordered copies. I pre-ordered copies at my comic shop. I took a picture.
I saw you in there,
show
yeah.
the people, you don't ask someone to do something that you aren't willing to do yourself. If I can't get off my ass and go on a train to the comic shop and pre-order my comic and vote for myself the same way that presidential and mayoral and gubernatorial candidates, when they go to the polls, they're voting for themselves. If I can't do that, how can I tell you to do that? So beautiful. I did it because it's not hard, right? But that's stage one. Let me tell you what stage two is. Stage two is what I'm calling the Dakota Incident 100K challenge. I want us to sell 100,000 copies of the Dakota Incident. 100,000 copies, which means the copies that were pre-ordered, they have to sell out. The extras, they have to sell out. If you go to your store, they don't have it, you say, hey, get me that book, I want it. If you don't have it, I'll call another shop. If they got it, I'm going to go to them. I want that book. 100,000 copies. It's possible. Let me tell you why 100,000 copies. Because if we sell 100,000 copies of the Dakota Incident, then we can ask for a static series. And if we don't get it, you must tell us why. You must tell us why we sold 100,000 copies of this book. And that data is not compelling enough for you to produce a static series. And if we sell 100,000 copies and we ask for a static series and we don't get it, then we have a decision to make, and then the suspicions become validated.
Okay.
Right? Then
Yeah.
the meme isn't a meme. Then it's the truth.
Mm.
Then we have presented you with data of demand. And the data of demand was not compelling enough to create an ongoing series of a character who is a $1 billion franchise, not million with an M, with a B. Okay? Like, I don't even know if the shareholders of Warner Brothers Discovery and James Gunn understand that Static is a $1 billion franchise. Reginald Hudlin does. Dennis Cowan does. I do. And now everyone watching this does. It's a $1 billion franchise.
Yeah.
So 100,000 copies of the Dakota Incident from the entire community. Because I'm going to say something else and I'm going to keep it real to you.
Let's go.
Part of what has limited Milestone is the marketing ethos that it is a Black universe. Milestone is a world universe. If you look at first generation Milestone, there were characters for all the complexions. Milestone showed the representation back in the 90s that companies were patting themselves on the back for in the 21st century. We had staffers from different ethnic backgrounds, and some of them were white. We had creators, characters. Okay? Milestone speaks to the cultural experience in a way that no other superhero universe does. But when you say Milestone is a Black universe, that is limiting. And a marketing philosophy that locks into that limit limits the potential of invitation to everybody.
And if anything, it absorbs the lie in its own right that tells people not to mess with it.
Milestone could be the Black Panther film of comics.
It really could. Most definitely.
Static is a $1 billion franchise. So again, we have the power to sell enough companies of this book to create compelling data that a Static series cannot be denied. And if it is, then we get to ask the question. And if we don't like the answer, I'm gonna be honest with you. Now, we've talked about what Milestone has meant for me. Milestone has given me purpose. What Dwayne McDuffie's death did to me, and how I continue to operate in the mission of Milestone, in the mission of Dwayne. And because of that, I have taken steps to protect Static in a number of ways that people will never know behind the scenes. And you don't have to know. But if we sell 100,000 copies of New History of the DC Universe, of Dakota Incident, and we don't get a Static series, I will have to walk away. And it's not walking away from the mission. The mission will continue until I'm incapable of it. But protecting him, I will not do it anymore. Because if compelling data cannot compel his evolution, that means I can't protect him. That means we can't even protect him. And if we can't protect him, then maybe we can make a decision to identify the next Static. Is it Ianu, Child of Wonder? Is it Ray Anthony Heights, Midnight Tiger? What characters are out there in the Black comic book publishing and creation ecosystem that can be the next beacon for the next generation and the generation after that? Okay? But our faith must be rewarded because it is finite.
Most definitely.
And when we get to the end of the faith, we have to make a decision.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to come to that. I think
Most definitely
Static should
no.
be immortal, but more must be done to make him immortal. And, corporations are risk averse. Let's just be clear. You see anything that is a success and you think someone took a chance, they didn't take a chance. They did deep dive data analysis. I guarantee you, when Pam Abdi and Michael DeLuca, the executives at Warner Brothers Pictures, said, yeah, we're going to take weapons, we're going to take Minecraft, and we're going to take Sinners. None of those were risks. Okay? They assessed. So corporations are risk averse. But here's the thing. The people who change the world aren't risk averse. You know who wasn't risk averse? Dwayne McDuffie, Dennis Cowan, Michael Davis, and Derek T. Dingle, and Christopher Priest. They were not risk averse.
Most definitely.
Okay? So great success comes from taking on risk. And if Static is a risk, the rewards outweigh the risk greatly.
Most definitely. And I will say, like, to your point, one thing that kind of sparked when I first started like making the content again was I challenged a lot of people by saying black folks don't care about Static, because if they did, they would actually support the books. They would actually support where he came from. We wouldn't see influencers asking James Gunn when a Static movie's coming out when we can't even get people to support a book. And because it was the day that Nicholas Draper IV announced Batman Static Beyond, I was hot because I was like, I watched Milestone Returns fall. I want this to succeed. And from everything that I've heard, first printing sold out. So I think I at least struck a chord in that degree. But that took me saying something. That took you guys putting out posts and saying FOC's coming. The thing that I noticed and the thing that you touched on is the fourth barrier, because we have the lie, we have pre-orders, we have the memification, but the memification is structurally tied to the fourth barrier, which is the lack of support from DC or the lack of support from publishers in general. Because to your point, you made that trailer. DC didn't put that trailer on their socials. They put James Tynion and the relaunch of DC Vertigo on their socials the same day. Why is it, to what you can speak to, that DC doesn't seemingly support the rebirth of Milestone, doesn't seemingly believe in pushing black characters? Because genuinely, it's you creators that are having to be out there like freaking Jehovah's Witnesses going, do you believe in a black character? Because it doesn't seem like the church believes it, but the congregation does. And it seems very odd in that right. What can you speak to? Because that's kind of the fear and why it's so tied to the memification, is that in like, we're already looking at May's solicitations, April solicitations. The Milestone characters are nowhere to be found. Mr. Terrific, Black Lightning, Vixen is nowhere to be found. We are going to be approaching 1,500 days before we see a black character have an ongoing. What can you say to the support or the lack of support visibly from DC?
Absolutely. So, I worked at a book publisher once, and I remember the publisher, really smart guy, he said, if everything is important, nothing is important. And every division of a department, especially marketing, sales, PR, there is no publisher that gives equal love and treatment to all of their books. No way. They identify the tip of spear books. They'll be like, first tier, second tier, third tier, right? So you better believe when it comes to DC, tier 1 is the absolute line.
Most definitely.
It's the absolute line. We could put Matt Fraction's, Batman in there. Tier 2, conceivably, Compact Comics, the Vertigo relaunch, things like that, right? So it's evident from what we've seen that this is not a business priority, right? So, okay, we accept that. Let's say that's not personal, although as we discussed, there are beliefs that are integral to corporate America. But one thing I want to say is when it comes to new history of the DC universe in particular, when it comes to Milestone in particular, everyone should know and put respect on the name of Marquise Draper, who is the editor. Marquise is truly fighting the fight. And no matter what, respect should be put on his name. In this project in particular, we also had the supervisory presence of Brittany Holzer, senior editor who runs the Wonder Woman office. And as this is a new history of the DC Universe book, Mark Waid was a consultant. And he was there for the early discussions with us to help us navigate through the DC Universe, because this is very much a DC superhero book as it is a Milestone book, okay? So there were people there. And to tell it to you straight, we have made something that is bigger than we thought. When we saw it all put together, it was like, huh. So when I tell you that this is worth your money and time and your pre-orders, I am not lying to you. This book is a book of the standard. The standard. Okay? And we will all die on that hill, that it is of the high standard. It is of the high standard of Milestone. It is of the high standard of the legacy of the DC superhero universe. It is of the high standard of the genre. It is high standard. So when we talk about, the lack of support, what is truly unfortunate is that, it's a word that I use in writing, in editing, and in life: compel. There is no more time for the casual. We are going to have to compel people to give us what we want. And the only way we can compel them, we can't compel them through collective faith. We can't appeal to altruism, because no matter what people say to you at companies, they're not families.
Yeah.
They are a collection of employees.
They're a business.
Okay? And if you don't believe that, check out what happened at the Washington Post this week.
Oh.
When you work at a company and anyone mentions the word family, polish up your CV. Because that person is selling you a lie as if you just fell off the turnip truck in the 20th century. Corporations aren't people. They're not families. So for us to expect human attributes from corporations is naive. What will compel them? Money. That's why I'm saying I would love to be in a room with the Warner Brothers Discovery shareholders. And I'd really like to say, listen, Static is $1 billion franchise. Let's talk about that. And then I would say, is there anyone in this room who is not interested in $1 billion franchise? No shareholder at WBD would say that. And so we are going to have to compel the publisher to give us what we know can succeed. And then our support must be consistent.
Most
no
definitely.
issue 1 support and falling off the cliff. No buying 5 issues of number 1 and 1 issue of number 2. No, we have to keep it consistent in a straight line. It's possible. Absolute Batman is doing it. The reverse trajectory is possible. We have great power as consumers, as a community, but the 2 essential problems is we don't understand where to move the levers, and we're too busy beefing with one another about caca.
Yeah.
We are at a critical time in this world, in entertainment and in comics and in the Milestone mythology and the continuation of Static. let's put away the beef about Kaka and let's all move in the same direction, and let's give DC Comics compelling data so we can get a Static series. And that's selling 6 figures of this book, and this book is worth it.
Most definitely. I think for me, it like obviously money talks, obviously analytics talk. I think for me, what coming from a PR background, digital media background, going to school for it, it makes you wonder if DC pays attention to social media. It makes you wonder if the common phrase on Twitter, like how you said back in the day, DC used to stand for dumb comics. To the public at large on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, etc., DC means discrimination comics because you see marginalized characters be either nothing or catered to on a holiday. Like Pride Month, you see Batwoman and Midnighter and Apollo once a year. February comes around, you're gonna see black characters come around for 5 minutes and then they're gone. And it's like we're living in a world where Vixen has had one miniseries. Black Lightning, like your first ever black character to ever have a comic book, was almost born in the most racist way possible because Jenny Isabella tells the story of how they wanted to make the brown bomber, and yet he's only had 35 issues total over the course of his like 50-year run. And it's baffling to where that's the final piece of it that I see is it almost feels like Milestone is being bussed in from the other school district to fix the diversity problem.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that? Where it feels like you said, Mr. Terrific, beautiful character that was finally realized on the big screen and gave so many black autistic kids like myself like validation and representation. Vixen could literally be the Beyonce of the DC universe if given the correct push. Black Lightning should be the mentor of the DC universe for so many young black kids, but isn't given the push. Why is it that we need Milestone when DC can't even handle its own black characters?
That's an excellent question. So let's brass tacks it. Above and beyond risk averse nature, right, is advocacy, right? Are people with some kind of influence advocating for this in the company other than the one human being that I told you about with the support of the second human being I told you about? So other than Mark E. Draper with the support of Brittany Holzer, are there other advocates, right? And if there are not, that's a fundamental problem, right? Because what we're talking about is money. Because the audience, if the audience is there and you make an effort to connect with the audience, and I mean more than a cursory effort, you connect, then you take it. You take that audience the same way Disney took that audience with the first Black Panther film. And talk about that first Black Panther film. That film did not happen until Ike Perlman, who was an enemy of things like Black Panther, Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel, until he was depowered.
Yes, Perlmutter definitely needed to get powered down for that. I've read his history.
Right? So that someone else could then say, okay, let's do it. Right? There's a former Marvel executive who now still does work with Marvel, a black man named Nate Moore, who most people probably don't even know that name. They know the name Kevin Feige, but they don't know the name Nate Moore. But Nate Moore is the whisperer. He's the guy in there saying, hey, you might want to look at this character, you might want to look at that character. And he can't just say that if he can't prove profit potential, right? And listen, if anyone at Warner Brothers Discovery or DC Comics needs something to show them profit potential, they just got to look at the Into the Spider-Verse films. They just got to look at what's happening with Miles Morales. Like, there's a Miles Morales series going, and then another one and another one. I don't see Miles Morales falling off a cliff anywhere. I walk into a comic book store, I see like a 16-year-old brother and his mom. The kid asked for a Spider-Man comic, and sorry, he's 16 years. He's not a kid. He's a young man. The young man asked for a Spider-Man comic, and I just did an experiment. I said, "Hey, who's Spider-Man?" He said, "Miles Morales." I was like, there's an entire generation for whom Miles Morales is Spider-Man, the same way there was an entire generation for whom Green Lantern was Jon Stewart, because of the Justice League animated series that Dwayne McDuffie was involved in.
Yes.
Okay? So, Miles Morales is eating the lunch of Warner Brothers Discovery and DC Comics. And just from a basic perspective of hubris, how can you be cool with that? How can you be cool with Miles Morales slapping you upside the head when you got Static, from whom Miles Morales came? You cool with that? You get up in the morning and you got Static, and you cool with getting bitch slapped by Miles Morales? I personally would not be comfortable with that.
No, not at all.
Okay, so there has to be some risk engagement. And to your point, Jo Malone is a popular character. We're seeing her in Absolute Green Lantern. I mean, one of the true genius literate minds of our time, N.K. Jemisin, 3 Hugo Awards in a row, gave us Far Sector.
Most definitely.
Okay, so we know Jo Malone is what's up, is the truth.
Yes.
That character get their own comic. Like you said, Black Lightning is the first Black character. That means Black Lightning is at the top of the mountain. Ongoing series, right? Pick the characters, put talent on them that can compel the retailers. Because here's the thing, the retailers are the ambassadors, right? So they're the people that we have to show the demand, and then they're the people who better get the return on investment.
I would argue, though, that this isn't even for me, though. Like, this is just for all of my peers. I would argue that we need to return to the era of the DC All Access. I feel like we need to return to the era where DC actually took creators like myself or my other peers seriously. Because look what we've done in the past few months, where we've woken up an entire fan base to understand what the pre-order system is. Why isn't it that DC, Marvel, etc., isn't trying to reach out to us to be the ambassadors? Because I did an interview with a comic book store owner a few weeks ago, and he straight up said, our new comic book day videos where people say, I picked up this book, this book, this book, and this book, and that was my pull list. And they see Fractions Batman, Absolute Batman, DC KO, and that's it. And that's what they see moving in their stores from those individuals. And like from the fan base, because they see those TikTok videos, those Instagram videos, etc. It feels as if while the comics book store is a very big part of that ambassadorship, I feel as if DC doesn't really know how to do PR, versus you're seeing Boom, Image, Vault, Ignition trying to do FOC videos and telling people about different things. And it feels as if DC is behind the curve. Why does it feel like that? Like, to harken back to the fact that you made the trailer, they didn't. They didn't put the cart before the horse. You did. Why does it feel like that there's no push on a grander scale to embrace newer social media? Because that feels like a very pivotal barrier in its own right. It's like the final wall, in a sense, where it feels like DC and subsequently Marvel don't fully understand that you need to rely on the new generation to be your ambassadors.
So that's a really excellent point. This is what I would say to that. Recently, there was a public statement from Jim Lee.
Yes.
Who is Triple Play, right? He's the chief creative officer of like DC Entertainment. He's the president of DC Comics, and I think the publisher of DC Comics. He's got 3 titles, right? And he said straight up, manga is eating our lunch. Manga is eating our lunch. It's a fact. What is it that manga is doing that we're not doing? Now, Jim Lee is one of the shrewdest businessmen in the North American comic book industry. A lot of people have the misconception that he's an artist that made it big. He is, but he's a shrewd businessman, and he's been a shrewd businessman for decades. So when he's talking about that manga is eating the lunch of American comics, I don't think he's just talking about the books.
No.
I think he's talking about the whole ecosystem. He's talking about the PR. He's talking about the formatting. He's talking about the stories, the storytelling. He's talking about everything. Like, that phenomenon is kicking our asses on a regular basis. And when someone of his stature makes a public statement like that, that's a declaration for change. I think questions are being asked now. I think they're trying to figure it out. So what I would say to you is, I think the company is imminently going to turn a corner. In terms of the embrace of social media, you know, that I don't know. I mean, honestly, I feel like the company does need a social media ambassador. And I use the word ambassador clearly. I'm not talking about running social media.
Right, no.
I'm talking about the person in DC Comics who is the liaison with yourself and your peers and influencers. Let's have this conversation, right? How can we be better? How can we all work together for the common goal? There needs to be an ambassador, okay? Because here's the thing. In December, DC took the #1 publisher spot in the direct market, which means they're in a very unique position right now. If they really engage this and say, okay, this is the problem to solve, that's it, man. They could take this. They could take all of it, right? And they have the resources. Because
really
you
do.
know what? They're a publisher.
Yeah.
You could criticize a variety of companies and you could say, well, that company is an intellectual property maintenance company.
Yeah.
DC Comics is that too, but they are a publisher. Okay? If they engage what you're talking about, if they had a social media ambassador, if they really say, why is manga eating our lunch? 360 degrees. And we're going to take that on. They could take this industry, man, and really change things. So I believe they're asking the questions. I don't know how long it will take them to get the answers. But in the here and now, the memifications need to be presented with action that will invalidate them. If the company does not take action that will invalidate the memes, then the memes continue to be valid. And that's it. It's not complicated.
Yeah.
It's not complicated, man. And so, you know, listen, the power that I have, which is very limited, is as a consumer, as a writer, and as someone that people like you are kind enough to ask to talk to and talk to the people, right? And we have to make a decision. What is the end of our faith? And I will give you an example, because again, I'm not just talking talk, I'm walking walk.
Most definitely.
I had a revelation about 1.5 years ago. Every time I bought a Black Panther #1, I felt like a sucker.
Ooh, speak on it. Yes.
I felt like a sucker. So like I said, I was born in 1969. So in the 70s, you had the Warner Brothers cartoons. And I think there would be one like of a donkey or so, like someone would have made a stupid mistake and then their face turns into a lollipop. And sometimes a lollipop would have sucker written on the lollipop, right? And at a certain point, I was like, every time I buy Black Panther 1, I feel like a sucker. Because I know I'm not getting Black Panther 50. I'm probably not even getting Black Panther 13. I'm going to get another Black Panther 1. And I'm going to buy that too. And then another one. I'm going to buy that too. Right. I'm like, when do I stop being the sucker? Now, two things happened. Ultimate Black Panther, which in a number of ways was the 616 Black Panther series that everyone wanted.
Yeah.
And it went into the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian Edward Hill, another intellectual in our business.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought every issue of Ultimate Black Panther. Now, this new one, Intergalactic, finite, I know, but you know what? That's my friend Victor Laval.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought it. I bought it because that's my friend, right? I want to support my friends. But I am not going to be the sucker for Black Panther 1 ever again. I've made that decision. Until you can show me that you will get to Black Panther 50, I'm not buying Black Panther 1. And that was a decision I had to make for myself. And I'm saying we're all going to have to make the decision. And once you make that decision, man, it's going to suck. Because you love these characters so much. These characters have gotten you through some bad times, man. It's going to suck. But I guarantee you, it's liberating. Now, I hope y'all don't have to get to that point. But if you do, look it in the eyes and face it. And then what you do is say, who are the people out there who are giving me what I want? Who are giving me the characters that I want? Who are giving me the stories that I want? And I am going to spend my money there because this cycle of masochistic disappointment must end.
Mm-hmm.
And I work too hard for my money to be played for a sucker. There should be a relationship. It should be mutually beneficial. It's a social contract, man. And if one party does not engage the social contract, then it's a parasitical relationship.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
And that's it.
Yeah.
So we're about to come up against a moment.
It very much feels like that, yeah, because a lot of people are fed up.
Listen, that moment is for real, and it's right there. It's right over there. You don't even need binoculars to see it. And the companies can avert this. They can change it.
That is very true, most definitely. Like, because I'll be quite frank, I feel myself being at that point, because if it weren't, I'll straight up, your book Bloodletter saved me from just being done for a hot minute, because I was
oh my goodness, thank you.
Because genuinely, like, I collect the Spawn compendiums because like I have a devotion to Todd McFarlane for Spawn. Like, I collect those because that means a lot to me. And hearing him speak about Spawn and how he fought for a black character to have prominence means a lot to me. And the breaking point was last year when I had to go to 8 stores, 3 cons, and fail to get the Dennis Cowan variant for Mr. Terrific Year 1. If it weren't for your book and Al Letson gifting it to me, I would have probably gave up. Like, genuinely. I was at a low. And that's when I came back and started making content. Was like, I tried, did a few episodes, and Al Letson came on for episode 3, and he reignited me to actually want to be a comic journalist again. So, like, both of you kind of, like, saved me from just giving up right as I try to get back on the horse. So I feel as if a lot of people are afraid that the memification is just going to continue. The name discrimination comics is going to continue. And like, that's what I constantly see online, is that like, you folks gave people hope this week. You guys gave people hope this week that you could spark change. I feel like the last little bit of fear from some people was, you saw Milestone returns as Milestone 2.0. You saw modern aesthetics, modern retellings of these origins. But it feels as if we're softening and almost, not, I wouldn't say idolizing, but more so capturing a moment where it's like 93 light with this, like with at least from what the pages showed from Mark Waid's previous issue of the New History of the DC Universe, where it was like, oh, classic Icon skin, classic Rocket skin. Virgil shows up in like the season 1 variant of his costume on the TV show. Right. And it feels very much like there was a lot of people that were kind of mad that like Nick's costume for Static season 1 is just gone. They were like, what happened to his beautiful work on
I
that
saw
suit?
those posts.
Yeah, and it's like that's kind of a fear too, where it's like, are we softening? And it almost reminds me of the interview Evan Narcissus did with Dwayne McDuffie right when Milestone Forever came out, and I kind of want to pose the same question
Yes.
that he posed to Dwayne to you. Do you have faith that Milestone is in good hands?
Okay, so let me go in order
For
to
sure.
try to address what you said, and the question about Milestone being in good hands, we'll call that the climax, right?
Yes.
I am telling you, this is not an opinion, this is not bias, this is fact. Milestone year 1 was hard.
Yeah.
Harder than hard. I guarantee you, New History of the DC Universe, a Dakota Incident, lives up to that.
Okay.
I will tell you right now, we started talking about this book almost a year ago. And I guarantee you, when you read this book, you will think the book was just written the day before you picked it up.
Oh, wow.
We are in the moment. And this book is not shirking from anything.
Okay.
I will tell you that just like every other superhero universe, the DC universe, the Marvel superhero universe, the universes, the mythologies, they recycle, they recalibrate. And I realize that for the fans, this happens with Milestone at a faster rate, and it's jarring. But what I can tell you is things from all of it will show up, right? Like, you're seeing what you call 1993 skins. But under the 1993 skins, there's certain characterizations, there's certain Easter eggs. You're going to be like, oh, I know who that is, because that person was from this book, right? So we're recalibrating in a way to bring the best of it together. And in terms of being in good hands, that needs to be proven to me. If as a company, it is in good hands, because Reginald Hudlin and Dennis Cowan are the producers. Marquise Draper is the editor and the advocate. And there are creators who are Milestone creators and who are new creators to Milestone, and they all love. There are people doing some of your favorite books for other companies that just reached out to me, and they were like, man, I'm a big fan of Static. I said, what? But you're drawing that book for that company. It's like, nah, man, Static is my jam. I said, what? Like, you don't even know who in the ecosystem loves these characters. So my answer to you is, I will not be able to answer that question until December of this year. If I see evidence that it is in good hands, then I'm a believer. And if I don't, then I'm not a believer. And that's that's just the way it is. You know, it's like I said, the Dakota verse has very particular and profound importance to me. But when I think about Dwayne believed that everyone had to go their path, and I would like to believe, I don't know, we don't know how the universe works. I would like to believe, if Dwayne's spirit still lingers, I would like to believe that he would say to me, you did enough.
Fair enough.
You are a good soldier. You could walk away today, and you did enough for the dream. Okay? So that's it. So the mission will continue, but my attachment to this particular mythology will change if I am not convinced by the end of the year that it is in good corporate hands.
Okay. So, final thing. Every episode, we give each person a final statement. What do you want to leave the fans with when it comes to this, your work? What do you want to give the fans as a final statement for this episode of Comics Unmasked?
We don't always meet your needs, but I guarantee you we're always doing our best. You know, sometimes you see things you don't like and you take it personal. I guarantee you, no one is in this business to give less than everything we have. And Milestone is special to so many people. I've worked on this book. I saw artists, DC artists, draw these characters in such a way that I knew they loved them. I didn't think that was possible. I was like, you're clearly a fan of Icon. This is not an accident. I didn't even know you knew who Icon was. So what I would say to you all is, we're doing our best to make the best stories. You're not always going to get what you want. I guarantee you it's not personal. And to keep it real for you, we behind the scenes don't always get what we want either, but we're fighting the small battles in the hope of winning the war.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being a part of this. It means the world to me.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for putting out compelling statements. I am so honored that in some way Bloodletter brought you back. That's what we're here for. I mean, we understand, the community understands that these things are not just things, man. These things they're cultural drivers. Like, comic books used to be the tastemakers. They used to be innovative. We gotta get innovative again. We should be leading the charge of imagination and possibility. And sometimes I believe, like, we're in the back of the bus and we're putting other mediums in the front. I'm like, no, we're in the front forever and ever. Amen. Until the end of time. It's comics.